Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So I just wanted to kind of watch the tail end of a debate that Daniel Haqiqatjou and Tjump recently had, and kind of focus in on a particular point that I think maybe many people missed out on, which is that Tjump actually was caught square admitting his position was inconsistent. So the topic of this debate was, are atheists consistent with their skepticism? And so what that means is basically that atheists will typically put a particular epistemological standard as to how to determine what is true of reality or probably true of reality. Okay. And usually they hold, especially I'm talking more like the new atheist types, not like a classical Nietzschean type atheist, right? More like the Richard Dawkins type atheist. They'll claim that science is how we determine fact from fiction. Okay, so the point of this debate was to show, okay, how consistent are atheists in applying that standard? If you want to say, I'm rational, I only believe in science, I only believe what science tells me, Daniel basically lays out an argument trying to show that no, atheists are not consistent. They don't base most of their beliefs on scientific evidence. Okay. Now, much of the debate, unfortunately, was like, really toxic, one person talking over another. And, I think it could have been a much more fruitful debate if they had kind of chosen their behaviors to be more kind of amicable and really tried to understand what the other person was saying. Nevertheless, the kind of basic point that happened in the debate was there was a distinction made between two kinds of atheists. Moral subjectivist atheists who don't believe morality. Well, I guess before that, I should say that Tjump laid out a rule. Okay, he said that, look, atheists are not being inconsistent because their rule is that you need scientific evidence for metaphysical claims, i.e. claims about reality. But if you have a claim that's not about reality, then you don't need scientific evidence. You don't need scientific evidence to say, I like pizza. That's just an aesthetic judgment, for example. Okay. So based on this rule, he said that there are two kinds of atheists: moral subjectivist atheists and moral objectivist atheists. The vast majority of atheists are moral subjectivists, which means that they don't think that there are moral facts about the world, i.e. morality is not objective, it's just subjective. Okay, I think that Tjump actually did a good job in grilling Daniel as to asking how these atheists are being inconsistent, and I don't think Daniel did the best job answering this question. He could have done a better job, but towards the end he did make some you can say some point that kind of addressed that, and we're gonna see that or at least some of it in the clip that we're about to watch. The other side is about the moral objectivist who believes that who's a moral realist. Basically, he believes that morality is kind of objective, that there's an objective fact of the matter, a metaphysical kind of status for morality within the real world. So where are we going with all of this? That basically Tjump said that he himself is a moral objectivist. Okay. But because the topic of conversation was about our atheists as a whole, as a group, what are their beliefs? He was kind of mentioning kind of both points of view, his own point of view as well as the moral subjectivist point of view. So what I want to focus on in this video is actually the moral objectivist point of view that Tjump himself says that he subscribes to. Okay, is he consistent? And you're gonna see, we're gonna see if he's consistent or not. Okay, so without further ado, let me just go ahead and play the video.
Yeah, if you want to define consistency as, you could be a solipsist and think the whole, there's no external reality.
How do you define consistency?
Let me finish. I defined it. How many times have I defined it for you? You can be a solipsist and be completely consistent. And you can say that there's no God that exists, and there's no physical reality that exists, because it's all just a figment of my imagination. A solipsist would be very consistent in that definition. But this is not the definition of skepticism that I have used in my introductory statement.
What is the definition of consistent? Like, I granted your definition of skepticism as trying to use science to validate claims about the world. That's fine. And if you don't believe morality is a claim about the world, then you're not being inconsistent. So how do you define
inconsistent? Means that if you demand having scientific evidence for all your factual claims, that in your own factual beliefs, you back them up with science.
Well, that's an example.
Your response is to say that, well, these atheists don't believe in political facts or moral facts, therefore, like, your argument is irrelevant. That's like,
well, wait. So you got part of that right. So one, that wasn't the definition of consistent. That was an example, but it was a good example. So yes, to be consistent means to apply the same standard to the same criterion. So if you have a criterion that you're a skeptic,
you're a genius.
Thank you. Wow. I appreciate it. It means a lot to me. So if you're a skeptic towards claims about reality, and you want to doubt claims about reality, and then something is not a claim about reality, well, then you don't need to be skeptical of that. It's not inconsistent because you're only skeptical claims about
really
reality.
Convenient.
So for moral
everything
So moral subjectivists, they literally, by definition of moral subjectivism in every academic journal, claim that morality is not a truth claim about reality. That's literally the definition of moral subjectivism, which most popular atheists are. And if you're a moral objectivist, like most philosophical atheists are, then you claim that sexual promiscuity is moral because it conforms to the philosophical arguments that indicate objective morality. So both are being consistent. One, the moral subjectivists are being consistent because they don't believe morality is a truth claim, so they don't need to be skeptical of it. Two, the moral objectivists are being consistent because they believe it is a claim about reality.
Okay, now watch here. He just realized he contradicted himself. This is the point.
And they use philosophical evidence to try and indicate that, not scientific, because we don't use science for everything.
See? There it is. There it is. That was the exact point that they've been arguing for an hour and 20 minutes. Okay. Daniel was saying atheists are not consistent because they demand that scientific evidence for claims about, well, he just said scientific in general, but Tom was the one who said, no, atheists are consistent because they only demand scientific evidence for claims about reality. Then he comes and says that atheists who are moral objectivists base their moral claims on philosophical arguments, not on scientific arguments. You see the contradiction there? So they're not using science when it comes to making claims about morality, and they believe that morality is an objective fact, that it's objective about, it's a claim about the world. Okay? Now, why is this relevant? Because atheists like Tjump believe that philosophical arguments cannot get you to a belief in God. In other words, right now, if you lay out a cosmological argument, a design argument, a this argument, a that argument, Tjump thinks, oh, this is all claptrap, that you're just basically doing these mental cartwheels to justify your beliefs, and that philosophy as a tool is incapable, even in principle, to get you to the belief in God. Okay, so it doesn't really matter what the content of your argument is, although to his credit, Tjump does actually engage in those arguments. But his fundamental stance is that in principle, those arguments can never get you to God anyway. Okay? Oh, well, isn't that convenient? Those arguments can't get you to God, but they can get you to moral claims about the world. So this is now the inconsistency. You have science as your standard when it comes to God, but then you don't have science as your standard when it comes to moral claims on, moral realism. That's the inconsistency. So Tom, you got to address this. This is a clear, flat-out moral inconsistency. The moral subjectivists for now are okay from the claim of inconsistency, but I think Daniel already mentioned this, and he'll address it. We'll tackle the issue of moral subjectivism in a moment. Let them continue.
And so both groups are being consistent here. I'm not sure why you think either are being inconsistent in any way, because you've granted that they're both being consistent in every conceivable way this entire debate.
Yeah, so it seems like you just conceding everything. You're just bickering about, like, what's the exact definition of consistency. All I wanted...
Okay, that looked really bad on Daniel's part. You're bickering about the definition of consistency. I mean, yeah, if the topic of the debate is, are atheists consistent? Then yeah, what you mean by consistent needs to be crystal clear, and that's actually the crux of the debate. That sentence changes completely if you have a different understanding of what you mean by consistent. Okay? at the same time, I actually don't know why there's any debate about consistency. I mean, consistency is obvious. Like what that means. It means that you're basically there's logically consistent A and not A, and then also consistently applying a standard, right? Those are kind of, and I think it's clear that they're both on the same page as to what consistent means here. So this comment came as bizarre to me, but whatever. But I do agree that, as Daniel's going to show, that Tjump has conceded actually a large portion of the points that Daniel wanted to make. Let's continue.
To show is that a large part of the atheist worldview, as determined by polling of atheists as a community, shows that their beliefs are not actually based on scientific fact.
Right.
That's all I wanted to show.
Well, I agree. Like, yes, we believe most of the things we believe, like my favorite color, my favorite drink, my favorite sports team. None of that's based on science. So yeah, the vast majority of my beliefs aren't based on science.
You think that what's my favorite color is the same thing as is genocide wrong?
No, I'm a moral realist.
Subjectivist that you're talking about. Yeah, we don't care about your objectivism.
You said you, so
it's the generic you, as in atheists. Believe that genocide being wrong is like saying, green is a bad color. Like, okay, you want to go with that extreme definition of subjective. You're just making atheists look more ridiculous, actually.
Well, I agree. I think it is ridiculous. I think that is a very silly position. I agree with you. And I don't think that moral subjectivism should be the consensus, but it is. So what?
Yeah, I think that a lot of atheists who are watching this are going to disagree with the idea that whether Afghanistan has a better government or is like hardcore Islamic Sharia is a better form of government than liberal democracy. That judgment is the same as, is pizza my favorite food or not?
Well, if they're moral subjectivists, they won't, but there are lots
You're saying the majority of them. You're saying the majority of them are moral subjectivists.
And
so in the chat, people can chime in and say, if you're an atheist, whether you think what Tom is saying about subjectivism, whether that's your actual view.
So I guess there's another point that can be added here, and I think Daniel did a good job of summing this up as to the problem with moral subjectivism is that it makes, these claims look like they're equal. I like pizza and genocide is wrong, when clearly those can't be the same. Now, part of the issue is that, moral subjectivists have an inconsistency, even though logically that's like a consistent thing. They're only applying science to claims about reality. There seems to be an inconsistency in two ways. Now, number one is behavior. So we don't go around imposing laws or making policy based on, who likes pizza or whatever. Right. But yet we have laws and police and courts and all this kind of thing, and jail and serious consequences, all of that based on moral claims. Like literally nations decide to go to war over like moral claims and moral beliefs. Right. So or at least that's like the propaganda that's sold to the people. And so you get popular support based on that. So it seems a little bit weird that, moral subjectivists, like there's an inconsistency in the behavior of how people who are supposedly moral subjectivists act. Right now, we're seeing this now with the whole abortion thing, right? You have many pro-abortion atheists like up in arms, protesting, doing this, doing that over, an issue which supposedly is just like, an aesthetic taste. So I don't understand that. Another inconsistency is with basically like how atheists reason morally. So, for example, in this debate, they brought up the issue of basically like the consequences of abortion. Scientifically, we can kind of prove it has these positive consequences or it has these negative consequences, or we can bring scientific evidence to show that the harms involved or whatever, right? Here's the thing. People who are allegedly moral subjectivists change their beliefs over time when their understanding of the facts change, Okay, and this is just the fact about human beings in general, is that we kind of grow in our moral judgments over time. Maybe there are some baseline things we don't change. Maybe people are hard-headed, but I think most people at some point in time have changed their beliefs on a particular issue when they found out more about the actual facts of the matter, the scientific facts affected their moral judgments. Okay, so just an example, maybe somebody at one point thought that I don't know, the war in Iraq was justified because there's weapons of mass destruction. Then they find out, okay, maybe not through science exactly, but through empirical investigation, they found out actually there are no weapons of mass destruction. Then all of a sudden their perspective on the war changed, right? That's like a simple example, but you can think of the same thing when it comes to, I don't know, like let's say studies to do with the long-term harms of certain drugs or lack thereof, for instance. Or, for example, when it comes to, the transgender issue, like with minors or whatever the case may be. Now, some people may base their moral judgments purely on just moral intuitions and say, no, it's my moral intuitions at work here. But certainly the facts of the matter play a big role, which is why people are always studying studies, trying to justify their beliefs or convince other people, because our understanding of the harm involved, the consequences involved, is part of any normal, rational human being's moral reasoning, moral subjectivists included. So if this is the case, right, and that leaves a big question, how is it that moral subjectivists are changing their minds when purportedly or supposedly this is supposed to be an aesthetic judgment? Clearly, the facts of the matter, the scientific facts matter for them as well as kind of an input into the moral reasoning. So you have kind of like the inputs, our moral intuitions, the scientific facts of the matter, blah, blah, blah. And you kind of input these into somebody's moral reasoning, and then you get an output. This is good, this is bad, I'm not sure, 50-50, whatever the case may be. Maybe it's like a spectrum, right? Clearly good, clearly bad, and then maybe somewhere in the middle. So, if that's the case, then Daniel's critique still applies even to the moral subjectivists. What he's saying is that, look, there are a bunch of so-called scientific facts that they're taking for granted when, in fact, science supports the opposite, right? Allegedly. I'm not even supporting or disagreeing with Daniel's specific examples. I'm just trying to resolve kind of the framing of the debate that these guys had, where it seemed like Tom wasn't even engaging with this point that's being made here, which was really the main point that Daniel was trying to make. He was trying to say, look, so-called skeptics will just accept propaganda about what the alleged scientific facts are, when you look into the science, they're the opposite. Okay, which is a fair enough point. I think probably everyone would agree with that there are at least some popular narratives that are actually not supported by science, and in fact scientific evidence points to the opposite direction. So if that's the case, that's an inconsistency, and if it happens enough, then I think Daniel has a point, which is that basically atheists are following a popular narrative, almost a pseudo-religious kind of political party or whatever narrative, as opposed to applying their skepticism across the board consistently. So that's pretty much what I had for you guys today. Inshallah, you guys found that useful, and you can let me know. Leave a comment, inshallah, if you have any further questions. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.